Welcome. In the words of Sheryl Sandberg, she once said, she is an American tech executive and author. She once said, the leadership is about making others better as a result of your presence and making sure that impact lasts in your absence. Absolutely spot on. Welcome to Athena Voices. We are reaching you live from Athena Center for Policy and Leadership, and it is brought to you by Clear Path Media. My name is Annabelle Oji, and we'll go straight to our topic for today. As, on Athena Voices, we're diving deep into the stories, the politics, and the personalities shaping Nigeria and Africa. Today's conversation centers on a man whose name is aged boldly in Nigeria's political history, Muhammadu Buhari. From the barracks to the ballot box, from the 1983 coup to the 2015 democratic wave, Buhari ruled Nigeria twice, first as a military head of state and decades later as a civilian president. But now, following his passing, the nation is split. By some are mourning, some are celebrating. Now, the question is, was he a symbol of discipline or division? Was he a patriot or a power player? Well, there's only one way to find out. And as we are delving right deep into that conversation, today we'll be discussing the multifaceted legacy as tributes and criticism pour in. Athena Voices sit with renowned human rights lawyer Kola Alakwini to reflect on the life and leadership of Nigeria's former head of state, Muhammadu Buhari, from his iron-fisted military rule to a seemingly controversial democratic reign. Welcome, Kola.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming. So now let's dive right into our conversation for today. But we'll start first. Let me start first by asking you, who exactly was Muhammadu Buhari to you? Was he a statesman, a soldier, or a symbol of something else entirely?
You rightly said in your intro, right, here is an individual who is multifaceted, and that's Muhammadu Buhari to you. General Buhari could be likened to the tale when we were growing up, where some blind men wanted to discover or know what an elephant looked like. Someone touched the elephant's tail and said the elephant's is like a rope. And someone touched the ears, and so it's flat, like like a saucer, a flat surface. Someone touched the trunk, and everybody gave different ideas of who they thought the elephant was, is, and that's General Babangida for you. I mean, General Buhari for you. He's everything to everybody. And he described himself using the words of a previous American president. Many people here, I belong to nobody, I am, and I belong to everybody. It wasn't Buhari's original quote. His speechwriters lifted it from another speech of an American president. In these climes, we don't really take plagiarism seriously because they ought to have credited the original owner of that thought. I was leaving primary school when General Buhari became head of state in 1983. That coup was announced by General Sani Abacha, who was a GOC of 2 Mechanized Division in Ibadan. I grew up in Ibadan. And I was 10 years old and a few months. And we just all jumped up and trooped. I was too young when the military were leaving in 1979. I was just 6 years old when Obasanjo was relinquishing power to Alhaji Shehu Shagari. But I remember vividly because we went to the stadium. And I remember name and all that kind of stuff, but too young to really understand what a military coup meant.
Okay.
So that myth was kind of shattered when Sani Abacha announced General Buhari, and we're all jumping up and, in blissful glee, not knowing what was coming. And immediately, that coup, his excuse in one of the announcer of the coup, General Sani Abacha, was saying was that our hospitals have turned into mere consulting clinics. I'll never forget. Yeah. So it's poignant that 42 years after his first attempt in power, the person who seized power in our country still died in the foreign hospital. We've come full circle. Karma is very nasty. Karma is a very nasty concept, isn't it? It just comes around and bites you on your butt. And that year of General Buhari went very fast and flurry.
Okay.
First, all the politicians were arrested, most of them, with the exception of very few were not arrested. And that was the first time in my life I was hearing of real lengthy sentences. You hear Clementi Song sentenced to maybe 240 years. This one, Balarabe Musa sentenced to this, and Umaru Diko's, all sorts of crazy sentences. Then you had the arrest of Abamieda, Fela Anikulapo Kuti. I'm a great Fela aficionado, and he was going to play abroad. And the military government had made a policy of they put a benchmark of how much forex you could have on you. And here was the band, Africa 70 or Egypt 80 was going to play abroad. And I think they found £1,600 on Fela. And he said, yeah, we're going to play abroad and everything. He refused to settle anybody, and that was why Fela was jailed. I also remember the three individuals, Lawal Ujolakwe, Bartholomew Owo, and another person, three of them, who had been arrested for drug trafficking, which was not an offense punishable by death. And the Buhari government came in, decreed, and then said anybody caught trafficking drugs would be killed. And they made that, essentially, that law retroactive. You cannot do that. It's illegal. It's like shifting the goalposts. And with so much pleas to to the government, telling them not to execute, this is wrong. The case was going on in court, and the military government still executed them. That was harrowing. And we were discussing it in school, even in secondary school there. I went to a school that was very famous for, being ahead of its times. And all these issues will be contemporaneous issues where we kids will be debating, even though we might not have understood the larger scope, but we know what was going on.
Okay.
I remember long queues in front of people's shops. It was as if we were in Soviet Union, or Cuba. People queuing to get groundnut oil, sacks of rice, and then if you sell foodstuff and you were holding this, the soldiers would come and break the locks and everything. And it was sold at control price. It was called essential commodities. Then we were just coming out of. We were just being. I wanted to say delivered, but delivered is not the right word. The military had just truncated the austerity measures of the Shagari regime. So we're moving from austerity measures into essential commodities. Nigeria is very flamboyant with names.
So
before
we'll say emancipation.
before austerity measures, we had Green Revolution.
Ah.
That was that was a slogan the Shagari government was coming in. As it was ending, the Obasanjo regime was giving over to Shagari administration and our parents. So I also remember why war against indiscipline. He gave his deputy so much leverage that I think this is one of the that regime then was one of the few that you would call with the two names of the leaders. They would always usually say the Buhari Diagbon regime, not the Buhari regime, because the Diagbon was very formidable. It was number two. He was Chief of Staff Supreme Headquarters. That was his title, where Buhari was Commander in Chief. And they came with this war against indiscipline. And the first time Nigerians actually queued, she would queue up, she would drop anything on the floor. We were all in the Y Brigade in school. We were co-opted and drafted into it. Had to go to the stadium and learn the Y Brigade song under Professor Samak Pabat, was a professor of music. And I can still remember some of the lyrics then.
Oh, really?
I was just 11. Yeah, there is a monster called indiscipline, living in our closets, and blah, 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 blah. You know, that was the intro of the Y Brigade. We must fight indiscipline in thoughts, words, and speech. Blah, blah, blah. You know, we learned this over 40 years ago. So 42 years ago now. So it was a man of many parts. It was a man of many parts. And he was overthrown by his coursemate, General Babangida, who was the chief of army staff. They enrolled in the military academy the same day, at the same time, in Kaduna then. So, yeah, I think he was unfulfilled in his first tenure as military head of state. The betrayal. It was a palace coup. It was bloodless. You know, his chief of army staff, his classmates, his course-mates removed the shocks from underneath his tires. So it went quiet. It didn't. You know, General Diabo was not in the country. He was in Saudi Arabia on Hajj with his son. So when the coup happened, the son returned to Nigeria, and they asked him where his father was. Said he was performing the Hajj, and then a day or two after, his dad returned. So there was no execution. It was bloodless. But I think it was shocking for him because he was placed under house arrest, which that in itself created another drama, because it was alleged that his first wife, he told his first wife not to go and beg the regime, the Babangida regime, for his release, not to go near them at all. The general can be very austere like that, very formidable. And the wife went to lobby. Some people said, no, you can do so, you know. And he never forgave her. And when she passed away, he never went to see her or see the body. He remarried a much younger Aisha Buhari that was 17 years old. And that was it. Divorced, moved on. It could be like that.
Okay.
So in a nutshell, that would be what I remember from his 1984 years. And he kind of just retired away quietly until he was brought back as chairman of the PTF, the Petroleum Trust Fund.
Okay, now, so speaking of forgiveness, do you actually think that Nigerians, have they ever, or did they truly forgive his military past?
I think he was idolized.
Okay.
And that was the foundation of his popularity. Nigerians yearned for the Buhari Diagbon years so badly, I inclusive, because optics was everything. And we saw Nigeria becoming orderly. We're very disorderly people. We're very lawless. And it takes for you to travel to another country or live in another country to see the level of our lawlessness and disorderliness. That regime of Buhari Diabo was able to bring some semblance of orderliness into Nigeria. We were very proud. It was a very proud moment. At least if you were not doing anything wrong, you had nothing to hide. That was, maybe I'm saying it with childhood innocence. We won the under-17 World Cup for the first time. Nigeria was, riding on high waves where we were doing well and a lot of stuff. They also resisted the IMF and World Bank policies. It was Babangida that gave in to them. Even some of the human rights violations then seemed like a peculiar way of solving Nigeria's problems. I refer to the incidents of Umaru Diko, Chief Richard Akinjide, and one other person and Chief Meredith Adisa Akinloye, who were stalwarts of the NPN, National Party of Nigeria. When the military overthrew, they all ran abroad, and Nigeria was trying to repatriate them to answer questions there on corruption. And the British government wouldn't yield for them to come. They had claimed asylum in England, and that they were never going to get justice in Nigeria. And what did we do? The Buhari Diabo regime turned to Mossad, the Israeli intelligence, to get these individuals into Nigeria, and they almost succeeded. They were put in crates and to fly out of Stansted Airport until a neighbor saw strange movements. I mean, you have very nosy neighbors in the United Kingdom. The curtains are always fluttering, and you get used to that, especially as a black person moving into an all-white area or something.
Absolutely.
They keep, that happens. So it was a neighbor who saw the activities going on across the road and phoned the police. And they were able to stop they were shipped in diplomatic crates. Under the international law, you cannot open the diplomatic pouch. But because there was suspicion of the diplomatic shuttle being used for a criminal activity, the British police forcefully opened it and discovered this gentleman drugged in the crate. They were to being shifted to Nigeria, which caused a huge diplomatic row in Nigeria then. They seized the Nigerian Airways plane. A British Airways plane was taken off in Lagos and they ordered the pilots to return to Nigeria. It would be blown up. And the plane was seized as well. And those were the days where, men were men in charge of. Buhari was 41 when he was head of state. He was in his prime. He was just 41 years old. So, it's also interesting that we still have geriatrics all appearing to run. The average age now who wants to rule Nigeria seems to be 80. So those were also I remember the jailing of Tunde, the journalists Nduka Irabo and Tunde Thompson, because they'd come out with what they call the Decree Number 4, which you couldn't criticize the government or any of the rulers. And they were working for the Guardian newspaper. They were picked up, faced to tribunal and sentenced to a couple of years in prison. I can't remember the exact years. So there seemed to be a repression of, human rights, justice, violation on journalists. But the regime was seen to be austere.
Okay.
They weren't, frivolous. They all rode in 504s and 505s. Peugeot was
as it is now. They weren't as frivolous as you find now.
I don't think so. Look at the choice of cars were all Peugeot cars. Nobody was going for the exotic Mercedes Benzes and all the Jeeps that we use now. Maybe you'd see them in a military Jeep, those Land Rovers of yore. Their children are schooled here. We went to school with their kids, secondary school, university, well, military academy. They were all using hospitals in Nigeria. Nobody was traveling abroad for medical checkup. So it was easy for people to identify with them. Surprisingly, when the Babangida regime also came in on the morning of 27th of August 1985, I remember because it was a date my birthday. It's like, what a birthday gift. And people still trooped out, even though some felt that, the Buhari regime was good for us. A few people felt it was excessive. So it depends on the side of the divide, if you're on the more liberal part, which was what Babangida sold, he had a toothy grin. And so there was him, smiling and waving the victory sign in the morning. He smiled his way into the hearts of Nigerians then. And then Babangida turned out to be one of the worst, if not the most corrupt military regimes we ever had in Nigeria. So, and then the general just went into quiet retirement, premature. For donkey years until I think it was General Sani Abacha that brought him back. Remember, Sani Abacha announced his coup in 1984. So Sani Abacha kind of rehabilitated him and made him chairman of the Petroleum Trust.
Right.
The Petroleum Trust Fund was like a parallel government. They took a percentage from the oil revenues in Nigeria, and you could feel them everywhere, from the Niger Delta to the Middle Belt. When I was in law school, they gave us an ambulance, and I think they built the law school clinic. Some will argue that it seemed that there were more development in the north than in the south, with the amount of roads that the PTF was doing in northern Nigeria was phenomenal. They might not be incorrect, because remember, during Buhari's first tenure as civilian president, they allegedly told World Bank to concentrate their development in northern Nigeria, that the south was already developed. So I think he came back a more parochial and tribalistic person in his civilian administration. Yeah,
Okay.
it was very nepotistic. Everything was Fulani, and pro-North and all, and he didn't heal the country with his stance. It was very divisive. There was a period, even the composition of his ministers was as if other ethnic nationalities in Nigeria did not exist. So it was a very different man who came back in 2015 to the man who ruled Nigeria between 1983 and 1985. There were two different Buharis entirely. And so it depends on the one you met. It was a very divisive figure.
I was actually going to ask my next question, which I was going to ask you, looking back at his first reign in 1983 to 1985, how would you describe his leadership style? But you already answered that in a way. So, but then many would actually say that in his 2015 victory rode on a wave of hope and change, like he always talked about. Do you actually think, two questions, and I'd like you to unbundle them in one breath. One is, do you actually think that he lived up to that promise of change and being the man of integrity? And then secondly, where do you actually think that disillusionment began?
Disillusionment regarding what?
That of change, that mantra they had at the time.
It wasn't a disillusionment.
A lot of people believe that it was.
It wasn't a disillusionment. General Buhari was a cult figure in northern Nigeria. Nobody delivers 12 million, 14 million consistently in northern Nigeria. It was a cult hero. And why was that? Because they saw him as being disciplined, and he dealt with corrupt politicians in the past. And if you had been allowed to stay longer, Nigeria would be a different place. Excuse Excuse me. Yeah, caught a cold there. So that was how he was seen in northern Nigeria. He was the only person that brings back 12 million votes. For the problem was that the votes were sectional. It wasn't cutting across Nigeria. And that was why his victory is traced to the incumbent, President Bola Tinubu. It was the one who looked at him and said, he went to Kaduna and told him, you can't be president this way. You're a factional leader. You're popular, yeah. Nigeria is two countries, whether we like it or not. The British designed it so. There's northern Nigeria and there's southern Nigeria. The only reason why they fused us together was for economic reasons. And this shows in our everyday life up till now. It was very popular in northern Nigeria, but that will not make you president of Nigeria. There's some requirements. You must have the spread, and you must win a certain amount of votes in all the states. And so President Bola Tinubu devised the formula and said, except you have a mega party and there's a merger of smaller interests. Prior to that, he had run 3 times and he cried on television.
So you actually also believe that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has a hand in his success?
Buhari did not deny it, and his wife told him when strange people started surrounding General Buhari and said, the people who brought us to power, they're not even here. Who are all these strange people? She was a very forthright woman and tried to put a check on him and say, we know where our victory came from. This and not this. These are all. The APC was just not ready for the wind of change that came. They campaigned, and it's like trying to topple an obstacle, and then when you topple the obstacle and you're not prepared for the rush, and everybody that was what happened. Why would we spend almost 6 months before choosing ministers? It sent a wrong signal to the international community, the international finance people. They panicked and they pulled their money away. So that was the first buckle that the economy buckled under. So I don't think they were really prepared for the change that came. You know, I remember also his baboon and the dog statements will be soaked in blood. Here was a man who had tried and he had gotten so frustrated, and he made that statement which spiked into the deaths of lots of people in northern Nigeria during the elections. I think it was 2010 or 2011. Lots of core members lost their life in Bauchi and all just for serving their country, because he had a cult followership who believes that they had robbed them of the elections. And because inflammatory statements which General Buhari had made, that the dog and the baboon will be soaked in blood. And his supporters just went haywire, and innocent people lost their lives. That was how much Buhari was loved in northern Nigeria. People connected with him for being austere. I mean, nobody can say that he enriched himself, but people around him may have done so. But he seemed
he was a real man of integrity.
I suppose so. He was a soldier. If you're talking about integrity and you juxtapose it with what happened at the Lekki toll gate, I'm not sure integrity would be a kind word to use a name. Okay,
so since you've talked about the Lekki toll gate, let's go back. Let's talk about the NSAS protest, because you mentioned human rights, you mentioned blood. That is one of the darkest moments in recent youth history. So I know we've had this conversation with regards to the NSAS protest time and time and again, but then since we are drawing down on his legacy, how would you assess the former President Buhari's response to that movement? And also, would you term the government's handling of all that happened during the NSAS as human rights violation?
It was a crime against humanity. It was even worse than a human rights violation. I couldn't sleep that night. I couldn't sleep. There was an uneasy calm on Nigeria. I couldn't sleep that night. I couldn't believe what we just did. to our youths. It was like taking us back to 1989, Tiananmen Square massacre in China. The Chinese government just rolled in military tanks and crushed the students' uprising. It was horrible. And that's what we saw with the NSAS movement. The NSAS movement started, and we covered this quite a lot of times.
Absolutely.
Where we discussed and analyzed, and that it just will never go away. The lies will never cover up NSAS. The lies of the government, the spurious attempt to revise the incidents and history, it will never go away until the government addresses it properly. The blood of the innocent still cry for justice. And this incident, NSAS thing, the movement started as a protest against police brutality.
Right.
They were profiling a lot of people. If you had Rasta hair or any young person,
saggy pants.
if you drove a Benz, a C300 was the profile, and you're a young person.
iPhone.
And so many violations. The police want to look into your phone. I've never seen anything so barbaric and intrusive. The policeman would be at a checkpoint, most of them illegal, and be asking me to open my phone. It's never happened to me before anyway, but I
maybe because you don't have saggy pants or dreadlocks.
If I did, I know how to deal with it. I would have. I mean, it's just a violation of your rights, the right to privacy, and even when the police hierarchy have said policemen should not stop people and examine phones, they still do so. So there's a break in the chain of command. The police are not even in charge of theirs. So it snowballed into actually a protest for the policemen themselves, if you remember, because people were talking about the emotional welfare of the police, the emotional psyche. Police are buying uniforms for themselves, buying shoes, they're not going on training, they're living in appalling conditions. So it was a movement that was it was a rolling movement. There wasn't a fixed ideology to it. You could see the frustration of Nigerians erupt, then turn into police warfare, and some people were even trying to agitate for a change of regime. I think that was where it all went pear-shaped. Remember, the governor of Lagos went to the president with a letter and demands of the president's response is one of the various memes which I have, because he just laughed and then threw his head up in the air. People were, you're playing with a general. It's like playing with the fangs of a cobra. And he responded. He responded the way a typical general would respond to crushing an uprising. He could see that this was going to snowball into something he wouldn't be able to control. And the government tried so hard to deny. There was video evidence. And then CNN came out with a strong rebuttal because they had the satellite imagery of soldiers leaving Bonny Camp. And then we went on a charade of a public inquiry. I think it was badly managed.
Okay.
We had leaders who it appears were practicing a gerontocracy, a government of old people and analog people. And I make fun of a lot of youngsters these days because our generation was a bridge. We wrote letters. We used NIPOST, P&T, then NIPOST. If you know the patience that comes with letter writing, you actually write a letter to someone in Onsuka from Jos, and you have to go to the post office and get a stamp and an envelope, and then it goes all the way to Onsuka before maybe it takes like a month before you get a response. Turnaround time maybe like 3 months. Sometimes your mail might even get lost. Sometimes mails don't turn up until like 6 months or 1 year after. Compared to the generation of instant noodles, people just put something on fire and it's ready in 3 to 5 minutes. That's the generation we have now. They don't know how to wait. Everything is instant. They don't write letters. They write emails and text messages, and it comes now. You send it now, and it gets it now. So when you're trying to tell, you're trying to explain to a child who was born maybe 15 years ago, that we didn't used to have phones, and every person, oh, we used to go to the metal box and drop coins. They don't even know how to use it. I was showing someone, these young ones, the telephone box with the dial, and they didn't even know what to do with it. They was just looking at it like a dinosaur had come back to life. So you now had these old men trying to respond to a digital age population in an analog manner. And these kids were just running rings around them. It's like being asked to babysit, that the daycare, and you had all these kids and they were just pulling stunts around you. He just used the most effective and repressive method, crush them. And that's what happened.
Since we're talking about crushing, let's go straight to insecurity. Boko Haram, banditry, killings, kidnapping. How would you rate, two questions again, how would you rate Buhari's efforts to curb rising violence, looking at what he inherited at the time, when you sit in a corner and they drop a nylon bag and everybody takes off? So how would you rate his effort in curbing insecurity, and was his military background a help or an hindrance in that regard?
Well, General Buhari should be one person that understood the insurrection the most, because he fought in the Civil War as a young officer. I think he was a lieutenant then. Also, he was governor of the northeastern region, northeastern states, which are comprises of 6 states now. So Yobe, Adamawa, Taraba, I think Borno, maybe Bauchi, I can't remember, but they now comprise 6 states. It was a huge swath. And then there was a further division of the states, and then it became the military governor of Borno State. So that's his terrain, right up his alley. That's back of here. Also, there was a time that the Chadian forces, some soldiers, tried to move into Nigerian territory. They were becoming a menace to the people in that area. And, you have Lake Chad, and there's a lot of fishing activities. So they were even taxing the fishermen and people there. And General Buhari was ordered to clear them. He mowed them down into Chad. It's very revered. Buhari's name is like a sandstorm in that area. So they knew him when he came back again. They must. These soldiers who are in Nigeria, Chad, that region, they will have been hearing of Buhari's name as kids. It was a stuff of folklore. It almost sparked a diplomatic war between Nigeria and France, because Nigeria and Chad all have, and Cameroon, they have a pact, a military pact with France, an alliance. So if they're attacked, France protects them, so to speak. So General Buhari moved his military tanks. He was of the Armored Division. They're in charge of the tanks. He moved right well into the enemy's territory, and they had to. France was calling Lagos. France was calling the Brits, being our colonial masters. London was calling Lagos, and President Shagari had to call him back to order that you disobeyed my order. I didn't ask you to go that far. That was the stuff General Buhari was made of. He was a patriot. You can't take that away from him. He was a patriot. He loved his country. It's like a father that loves his children, but his love language might be different to what some of the kids are familiar with. So he also have understood that nexus and that area properly than everybody else. But unfortunately for him, the campaign, which he had been campaigning and saying he was going to crush this and do that, towards the election period that brought him in, the National Security Advisor, Colonel Sambo Dasuki, who was the man who arrested him. Colonel Sambo Dasuki was one of the 5 majors that arrested him in 1985 when he was overthrown. Sambo Dasuki, David Mark, the 3 others. Anyway, so the tide had swung round in favor of the Nigerian forces, because we were using mercenaries And we were actually pushing back and reclaiming some of the lost territories which Boko Haram had been hoisting their flags. It was on that crescendo that General Buhari became elected. And the first thing he did was to sack them off. And because he said, no, we should. He's an old-fashioned military general, old school. He believes a country's battles must be fought by its soldiers. So he sacked the mercenaries, and then we lost that momentum and the ground that we had gained again, because it just snowballed into more of an industry again, with all sorts of rumors about the men not being fed well, not being paid their allowances, etc. Some people were pocketing money here and there. Deals were being done by various ministries, and we are where we are now. It didn't succeed. That's just the long and short answer. Okay. I remember in his address, he spoke like a general, saying he was ordering the military chiefs to the north, but did they obey him? How long did they stay there for? So it didn't succeed.
All right. You talked about the health sector and how he still died in the London clinic. Let's go straight to the health sector. But first, looking back 2019, 2020, during COVID-19, I always say that COVID-19 should have been an eye-opener for especially we as Nigerians. Some people would complain that Nigerians barely heard from their president at that time when they should, like you had in other, I hate to use the word, but other saner climes. So what exactly does that silence tell about his leadership style? That's one. And secondly, with regards to Nigeria's health system under his watch, there were increase in medical tourism and massive exodus of brain drain medical professionals moving that way. So how exactly do you think that his government, even though most people will tell you that it didn't start from his time, and it is even still happening now, but how exactly was his government able to tackle or deal in that regard?
Well, a lot of people forget that President Buhari himself was an ill president. He was a sick man. So he couldn't give his best.
Are you referring to the former president as a sick man?
He was not healthy. And he said it himself. He said, I've never been so sick in my life, when he came back after spending almost 6 months in England. He said so. Self-admitted statements, confessional statements are incontrovertible. He admitted that he was very ill. He said, I've never been so sick in my life. And there were newspaper reports where he said, oh, I wish I was younger. I wish I was more of good health. All the times I had wanted to be president and I couldn't get there. So that was a backdrop. This was a time where everybody were wearing masks and keeping it. He was very lucky. His bosom friend didn't make it, Chief Abakari. Yeah. And he could have easily infected the president with COVID. So he was very lucky that he didn't catch it. Especially he was very vulnerable, having been in and out of hospitals in England. It's a shame that we'll hear the president has a hair infection, nose infection, or throat infection is jetted off to the United Kingdom to seek treatment. And I think it was shameful that a former presidential spokesperson said that if he was using Nigerian hospitals and Nigerian doctors, he would have died a long time ago. Most of these fantastic hospitals abroad are being manned by Nigerians.
Absolutely.
I think it's a failure of leadership. General Sani Abacha never traveled abroad to treat himself. He was there all through. And kudos to the First Lady, former First Lady. She was one of the people who sang the alarm or rang the alarm bell when she said her daughter was ill and they went to the state house. They didn't even have paracetamol. And yet every year in the budget, you see the billions budgeted. So that's why I said the man may not have stolen money, but people around him have questions to answer. His wife built a new hospital before she left, world class. I wonder why they didn't take him there. So we've seen a pattern of our leaders, and this is my ideology. I might be wrong. You see, we will never have light constantly in Nigeria if we don't take, if the presidency does not give itself privileges. The presidential mansion, the Aso itself. Here they budgeted 10 billion for alternative power supply, solar system and everything. If I were to be in power, or if I were to be able to advise the government, I would just not use any alternative, whatever. I would insist on using NEPA, because that's the only way. Yes, that's the only way you can feel the pulse of Nigerians. That's the only way you know what's going on. If you're in a cocoon and every time light, first they put you in band A or super band A, you being the president, and then once light goes, generators kick in, inverters kick in, you're cocooned. You don't know what people are passing through. We will never have light. As simple as that. If your children, like I said, when we were growing up, we had most of the people in power, their children went to school in Nigeria. They went to the government colleges, or the federal government colleges, and etc. So you would go, you'd be able to see what's happening. Your parents, commissioners or ministers, they all knew what was happening because you had direct feedback in your home.
Absolutely.
The same with hospitals. If I were in power, or if I were able to advise the government on policy, I would draft a law and ensure that all the ministers, commissioners, anybody that is going to serve in government does not go abroad for treatment. That's the only way we'll fix our power. Our health does not send its kids abroad for education, at least to first degree level. That's the only way we're going to revamp our education system.
At some point, we heard the recent president make that pronouncement. How much did he even do?
Okay, so the buck stops on that president's table to ensure that happens. I know President Yomi got treated in the Duchess Hospital in Lagos when he was ill, but a lot of other people just want to just flee the country, and there's no shame about it. Even General Buhari, who campaigned and said there will be no health tourism, I will not travel abroad. He was the first person that ran abroad. So that's hypocritical. He could have handled things better. It's a shame, really. The person who could even have helped, the former Labour minister, who himself is a medical doctor by training, started defending a very indefensible policy by saying, "Oh, Nigeria produces an excess. We're exporting doctors." The number of people that jackpot during COVID, there were two charter planes that came to Nigeria to move doctors and nurses. The British government waived the visa requirement during COVID to be visa on arrival for this special set of people. If it wasn't for the immigration that stopped the plane, do you know how many doctors and nurses will have exited from Murtala Mohammed Airport in one day?
In one day.
So they delayed them they still left. It was just that when they were leaving, there was less publicity, and the people who came to pick them didn't come with such bravado as if they were going to come and evacuate our doctors. But I assure you, almost all of them left, because when the lockdowns were lifted, the agency was still in touch with them and everything, and they moved them in smaller batches. So they all left.
All right, caller, we're due for a break. We need to go on a break, but before we go on that break, because you talked about the former first lady and what she did, she revealed during his death. She said, and quote, "Tell Nigerians to forgive me." That's what she said. Buhari told her. So now, what do you make of that statement? Do you actually see it as a general plea, or does it suggest that he was actually aware of the deep failings?
I think it was just a Muslim, his Muslim background and ideology that informed that. The classic Muslim prayer when someone departs is, "May he find kindness or grace with his creator, and may he forgive him of all his sins." So I think it was that philosophical You have to look at that philosophical background, especially see he was not even in the position to address the nation. And I think he had said so in one of his retirement speeches in Abuja. I've seen the video, I even saw it today when he was leaving government, that there's no way he would not have offended some people, but they should forgive. He was just trying to make peace, you know. I know all religions, advocate peace, but I know the Islamic prayer and the admonition follows that pattern.
Okay.
And I think that's the reason why he said so. It was, you can't fault him for being a patriot. There were just some things that he did they were atrocious that you would never not fathom it. Yeah, and you have to look at his military background. Is that I'll give you an example: the removal of the former Chief Justice of Nigeria, yeah, then Onohe with a flimsy ex parte order without going to the parliament. You can't remove a CJN without two-third majority of parliament. But everybody was scared. And his team did that for his personal reasons of capturing the judiciary during election petition. So they were looking, okay, we're going to go for a second term. What are going to be the obstacles? And then all the courts. This one institution can stop you from being president. So they had to deal with the courts that way. And before they did that, they struck fear into the minds of the judges by breaking into their homes in the middle of the night. Have you forgotten the DSS raids and judges? And I'm not absolving the judges of anything. I mean, how much is your salary when they're finding Ghana must goes of forex in your homes?
Some of them also had their hands in the cookie jar.
So there you go. The EU goes to equity must go with clean hands.
Absolutely.
So perhaps the pattern with the pattern of the execution of his ideas. He wasn't a very patient man in some places, and just his military training kicks in, and he wants instant answers. To send DSS to go and break into the judges' homes and all. You want to remove a CJN, you don't have the patience to go through the National Assembly, so you use an ex parte order from an obscure court, the Code of Conduct Tribunal, and someone who was there eager to do your bidding. He himself, his hands unclean. We've seen him beating up somebody in Banex, etc. So you can, it was his regime, his military regime, and his civilian administration was very colorful. A potpourri, mixed bag. Some even at some points accused him of misogyny and being anti-feminist when he said his wife belonged to his living room.
Is that also room?
And the other room as well, his kitchen. Said my wife belongs to my living room, my kitchen, and the other room. And some female groups almost tore him into pieces. But that's general for you. This is a girl he married when she was 17 years old, and he sent her through all the schools apart from secondary school, and that's the way he sees her.
All right.
So it was a very interesting man. Some people close to him say he also has a wicked sense of humor. You had to be close to him and he had to know you very well for you to see that part of him. So you say in the West African subcontinent, especially the Sahel states, that did hold him in high esteem, and a lot of them remembered him from his military administration. When it comes to military and ambition as well, he was a very fulfilled man. He was GOC, General Officer Commanding of 3 garrisons. He was military secretary, which is a very powerful position because that's the head of the administration and the military, so to speak. It's the engine room of the military administration. He was a head of state and 2-time civilian president, commander-in-chief.
All right, I hear you say it was colorful. It was excuse me, it was a mixed bag. All right, we'll continue this conversation, but we need to go on a quick break, and when we return, continue this conversation with Kola Alakbini, international human rights lawyer, on the man, Muhammadu Buhari. See you later.
Introducing Athena's suite of publications by the Athena Center for Policy and Leadership, a not-for-profit, non-partisan think tank operating at the junction of theory and practice. Athena Notes brings you timely from top academics and journalists. Athena Perspectives keeps you connected with the latest trends and developments in Nigeria and the West African sub-region. Policy Pulse delivers monthly analysis of policy trends with Athena Governance Insights. Dive deep into national challenges and policy solutions through data-driven research. Athena Third Tier spotlights local governance at the grassroots level and offering solutions to improve outcomes at the grassroots level. Subscribe to Athena Center for Policy and Leadership today.
If you just joined us, this is Athena Voices. We are reaching you live from Athena Center for Policy and Leadership, and it is brought to you by Clear Path Media. If you just joined us, you've actually missed out on the first 50 minutes that we've been talking about the man Buhari, Muhammadu Buhari, and we have got Kola Alakbini, who is an international human rights lawyer, who is taking us straight to history, and we're still talking about the man Buhari even till his death a few days ago and his burial just yesterday. All right, we need to start rounding off on this conversation, but then before we go to the rounding, to our last comment, the activist Omoyele Sowore claimed that Buhari died years ago of leukemia. Wild as that may sound, that theory has actually lingered because he has a very large following. So why do you actually think that such narrative is taking root in Nigeria's politics, and why does it actually reveal, or what does it reveal about public trust, especially with regards to government communication?
Well, I know you and I know Sowore very well. You've interviewed both of us together. He's a friend and a brother, a client. So we'll have to ask him where his evidence is next time we run into him. I have no evidence of such. It will be difficult for me to comment on what I don't have evidence of. But I think the international community would be would it be silly of the American president to be meeting a body double and be part of that charade, or the British Prime Minister to be meeting an impostor? So that's the way I like to think of it. The president of France, Emmanuel Macron, has met President Buhari a couple of times. You think you think they really think low of themselves to be meeting someone who is brought in as a body double? No, I don't think so.
So that means we need to demystify that, because I've seen comments and some people write on social media, died a few years ago,
the children, you saw the wailing of the daughter outside a London hospital. She was wailing over an impostor. The son followed the casket of an impostor to be buried in his father's compound. You buried an impostor in your father's compound.
The wife, the current president.
They are crying over the. So come on, people should know where especially this theory is very. It comes from one part of the country a lot when you're online. It's the IPOB movement that they seem to fuel this fallacy, and the United Nations is going to allow an impostor to the United Nations Plaza in New York to present the address of a country. A fake person, someone from Sudan would come on. People just a headless mob just allow themselves to just run amok. I don't think that's the
great. Nice. Okay, so now, for some persons, Muhammad Buhari was seen as a man who fought corruption. Do you actually believe in his anti-corruption stance? Was it genuine or was it selective? And what enduring impact, if any, did his anti-corruption war have? Because if he's, like you talked about, the fact that he had integrity, he wasn't corrupt, but then he had some corrupt people. You had the former Minister of Humanitarian Affairs, you have the Accountant General, and quite a number of them during his administration.
Well, if you remember when General Buhari was transitioning into President Muhammadu Buhari, the first few months of his regime, and Buhari's coming, Buhari's coming. There were reports that some people were even returning stolen funds.
Right.
Because they knew the stock which it was made of. The question is, what changed? It's all in the body language, isn't it? And you remember the grass cutter? Yeah, the former SSG who was
Babachir
Lawal, who was, who left government in controversial circumstances because of inflated prices of contracts. He was unethical about his dealings. He was, dipping his hands into government till through a company which was a proxy. And there were loads of them. His kinsman from Katsina, the former aviation minister, who claimed he bought a fire engine truck for over ₦1 billion, as if people would not check the cost of fire engine trucks on Google. All it takes is just type in how much does a fire engine truck cost into Google and you get your answer. Or is this Stella Odua, who was under the previous administration, who said she bought bulletproof limousines, and they're giving outrageous amounts, 255 million naira, when the dollar was like 165 to naira. So she bought each one for over $1 million. People just went on Google and found out the price so easily. And that was one of the reasons why she had to be let go by the government. So we didn't really see anyone who was punished, any of his inner circle who was punished for corruption. Let me tell you one of the most outrageous things that General Buhari did in his second coming. There was one he did in his first one. That was the cancellation of the underground railway system in Lagos State. We still paid money because they went to arbitration. I told you this story before, long ago. Lagos State was going to have one of the most complex underground rail system to address the crowd, the population. And by the time General Buhari was coming in, he just cancelled the contract. And he said Lagos State is going to develop more than, allegedly said Lagos State was going to develop too fast than others. The development had to be uniform. So the contractors went to arbitration. And they collected the full amount for the contract, but we didn't get a railway system. So we lost that chance. And then you see it again happening time and time under him, with various people under him. Yes, you can argue that he gave them the East, the bridge, the second Onitsha bridge. Yeah, Nigerian bridge. He fixed the perennial Lagos-Ibadan expressway that nobody could fix all these years, and the railway system as well, which were policies which had started under the previous administration, but he duly completed them. But the amount of nepotism surrounding him, his wife's brother, that's the president's brother-in-law, getting contracts for printing money. So I was going to tell you the second outrageous thing that happened under President Muhammadu Buhari was allowing Emefiele or Emekobe, as people call him, the illiterates in the market were just giving all sorts of funny names. This man committed the worst atrocity ever in modern contemporary politics in Nigeria. This was a man who was saddled with keeping or entrusted with the voting materials, the sensitive materials, as the governor of the central bank. And you come out and you say you want to be president. Where has he done? You're going to be the keeper of the purse, and they're still going to contest. He wants to be the judge, the jury, and the executioner. And then President Muhammadu Buhari does nothing. He didn't ask him to resign. He just behaved as if he didn't see it. Where does this governor of central bank, delve into politics? And Emefiele did it in such a brazen manner. You want to tell me that there were no security reports of this amount of houses which have been seized from him, 750 houses or so in a housing complex belonging to one person and various other things? And you want to say there were no security reports on him to have indicted, just like he moved in on the CJN? So he seemed to look away. Maybe it was old age, maybe because it was not as strong as it used to be.
But you don't see it as cherry picking, right?
I don't think so. I'm not sure. I just see it as being inconsistent.
Does it actually bother you that even some of these people that you mentioned, they still come on air and they give advice? They still come on, you still find them in the ballots trying to contest for one position, one public position or the other?
I think that's your responsibility as watchdogs. You guys don't grill them enough. Some of them ought to be in jail in some countries. And you see them come on air and try to revise history. It is your responsibility to challenge them with facts and say, this was actually what you said. This was what you did. Someone like the former Minister of Labor, he should share the blame in the decay in our hospitals. Being a doctor himself, he ought to know better by saying, "No, we're exporting doctors," when actually we were losing doctors. And you had all sorts of funny. What's a University of Transportation doing in Daura? And the president could not reject it and say, "Hey, don't bring it to Daura. Take it to where you have a transportation hub, like where you have the waterways or where you have, And we all know that Rotimi Amechi was just being, it was just, it was just kissing something when he did that. It was for political survival, and just, it was being nepotistic or trying to flatter the president. And the president also have said, "Hey, you shouldn't do this. We can maybe bring an hospital, not this one. We're not a transportation hub. So why are we having this? Excuse me. Why are we having this in Daura?" Well, like I said, a lot of developments seemed schemed towards the north. It seemed it was a pro-northern president, so you can't take that away from him. Yes, he did a few things from the south, and another lasting or enduring legacy of his administration was the rampage which Fulani headsmen, brought onto Nigeria. I think President Buhari's father, his father was from Maradi in Nigeria. He died when the former president was 4 years old. His mom is Kanuri, or was Kanuri. So I think he had a longing for his Fulani roots and culture. He always wanted to identify with them, and he didn't have the chance because his father died young and his mother was Kanuri. So that's why he doesn't speak Fulfulde, because Kanuri is his mother tongue, actually, not Fulfulde. So he always had a soft spot for the Fulanis and kind of idealized their way of living. And how can somebody be driving cattle onto someone else's farms and there's no punishment for it? If it's cattle is a source of income, just like the farms. And the surreptitious manner which the Buhari administration tried to claim land from people with the Ruga thing, and if it wasn't that was fiercely, robustly rejected. If the Igbo man goes to Kano, who is going to give him land to build a shop for free and sell spare parts? Why should we do the same for Fulani headsmen?
Right.
And how come Fulani headsmen will come into our countries and be driving cattle all over the place, and they are carrying assault weapons and we cannot arrest them? And why was everybody so timid to act? The police couldn't disarm them. The army couldn't disarm them. These people were carrying all sorts of assault rifles.
But it's still happening up till now. And if you recall, even the Abuja landlord, Nyesom Wike, the minister of the FCT, came up with that threat when he started. But all of a sudden,
these people are not spirits. They ought to be apprehended and charged to court. Possession of illegal firearms is a crime. It's still a crime in Nigeria. And if we don't do that, we're going to keep seeing these instances happening in Benue State and in Plateau State. which have these two states are one of the most fertile areas of Nigeria. Those are the food baskets that we have all sorts of exotic fruits and farm produce from Plateau. Irish potatoes, the cabbage, lettuce, in Benue, the mangoes are phenomenal. The yams and all. So with all these problems which we're having with food insecurity now and people being 90% of it will go away if we address the Fulani headsmen carrying assault rifles all over and driving cattle all over the country into where they're not supposed to drive it into.
All right, we need to round off now. Very quickly, have Senator Shehu Sani, who said, and quote, "The present and future crop of Nigerian leaders should take lessons from the wave of unrefined emotions of Nigerians in the last 48 hours. A new generation of retributive citizens have evolved, unrestrained in their anger, unfiltered in their bitterness, and unforgiving in their soul." We've seen how some were mourning his passing and some were celebrating, even in the northern part of the country. So what does that actually or say in terms of the contract about his legacy? Is it even fair to judge a leader solely on those kind of public sentiments? And what should the other leaders be thinking in terms of lessons, especially with regards to what Senator Shehu Sani has said?
It's not new. You see, history, people say we don't learn from history. They say history often repeats itself. We are the ones that repeat history, not history, not the other way around. They say history often repeats itself. We repeat history. There's nothing new in what you saw yesterday or the day before yesterday. It happened over 30 years ago when I was in university. In 1993, Chief MK Abiola contested for elections. In 1994, General Sani Abacha sacked Chief Ernest Shonekon once Justice Dolapo Akinsoya declared that the elections were illegal and that the interim national government was illegal, rather. General Sani Abacha moved in. Fast forward, Chief MK Abiola declared himself president when he saw that Abacha was going to renege on the agreement which they had. Chief MK Abiola was arrested. For 5 years, was in detention. His business was crippled by the government. In June, I think, just after the Pope left, General Sani Abacha died in mysterious circumstances. And people trooped out. And they were jumping up. And that was what happened all over University of Ibadan and all the schools. In majority of the states in Nigeria, people were jumping up and rejoicing that Abacha had died. Exactly a month after Chief MK Abiola passed away in mysterious circumstances in Abuja. And there was mourning all over the country. A tale of two people, a tale of two cities.
All right.
So you're going to see the same in some other future leaders. I bet you're going to see something like that. I don't want to mention names.
Yeah, please don't mention names so we don't finally break our table.
So you're going to see when a couple of other leaders, people having presidents in Nigeria pass away, you're going to see.
All right.
And we cannot choose how people mourn. We cannot choose how people respond to these things, especially when the policy of the person that passes away affects you directly or not. You cannot beat a child and ask it not to cry. You cannot legislate emotions. It happens in the WhatsApp group for my class, the Millennium Set in the law school. And someone passes away, and there's just traffic just goes on as if nothing happened. And someone passes away, and then the whole class is at a standstill. So he who passed away, and it seems as if the class did not stop, and then people are saying, admin shut the platform. What are we shutting the platform for? You are regulating mourning. People will always respond how they want to respond. Absolutely. You cannot, even when a king joins his ancestors and you are shutting the markets from trading, you are stopping people from buying food and everything. Are people not going to eat in their homes? Are you going to legislate that people should not eat because one man passed away?
Kola, we need to round off. If you can help us in 1 minute, 30 seconds if you can. Finally, talking about the history would definitely have a way of redefining legacies. So in the next 10, 20 years from now, how do you think that Muhammad Buhari will be remembered, either by the people or by the system? Very quickly, if you can.
I think a lot of us will have been retired and not be active in the next 20, 30 years, if we live to see those years. There will be a new crop of citizens who will have raised. But whether fairly or unfairly, Muhammad Buhari will be known for being a man of many parts. Just the same way we learn about Mansa Musa or the Edo kings or the Alaafin of Oyo, the one who was weak and the one who was a warrior, the king who was deposed.
All right.
Just the same way we remember the Overamen Ogbaisis.
All right. Kola Lakwini, international human rights lawyer. It is always a pleasure having these conversations with you. Thank you so much for coming.
It's always a pleasure to speak with you.
All right, viewers, you have heard it all, the complexities, the contradictions, and the controversies that shaped the man Muhammadu Buhari, decades-long influence in Nigeria, whether you see him as a reformer or a relic, a patriot or a polarizing figure. His impact is absolutely undeniable. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll see you again next time, Thursday, on Athena Voices. But then we'll see you again tomorrow on a daily brief. Thank you so much. Remember that we're on Twitter, that's X, we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, and we're on YouTube. Remember to also leave your videos or notifications on so that when we are live, you will be live. Thank you for watching. My name is Annabelle Oji, and it has been an absolute pleasure hosting this conversation this evening. Good evening, Nigerians. Good evening, all. God bless you and yours. God bless the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
Amen.